So when we were finding the optimal consumption point in the previous videos, we were holding constant, so ceteris paribus, our income, so the budget wasn't changing. We were holding constant the prices, they weren't changing. Okay, so we are holding everything else constant. Well, what happens when we start to change things like our budget or the relative prices? So here we expanded this graph out a bit more so we can see more options. And let's look at what happens when there's a change in income. So let's start by first adding our budget line. And we were looking originally at an income of $300. Price of a video game is $60. Price of an app was $2. So let's put that budget line on this graph. So if we spent all $300 on video games, we could get 5. And if we spent all $300 on apps, we could get 150. Just add this line in here. And from there, we could find that optimal consumption point, right? That's what we did in our previous videos. Now, the question is, what happens when your income changes? So what if income instead is $600? So what if we have $600 to allocate to video games and phone apps? And we know from our previous discussions what happens to the budget line, right? It shifts outward parallel. And we can see that because if we have $600 and we spend it all on video games at $60 a piece, we can now afford 10 of them. If instead we spend all $600 on our $2 phone apps, we can now afford 300 of them. And I'm just going to connect those dots here. So again, we can find the optimal consumption point, the point at which the marginal benefit equals the marginal cost, the point at which the opportunity cost, the slope of the budget line, is equal to the marginal rate of substitution, the slope of the indifference curve, where the lines are tangent. And we can see that here. So notice as our income increases, we can afford more video games and more apps. And since we like them both, represented by those higher indifference curves, we are willing and can afford it, so able to get more. We can actually connect these, so we could put in other budget lines and you could start to connect all these optimal consumption points. If you connect all these optimal consumption points, it shows you the combination of two goods, your apps and your games, as your income changes. This is what is called the income consumption curve. So the income consumption curve is showing us as we change income, what happens to that optimal consumption point, that combination of apps and video games we are willing and able to buy. Now notice here that as our income increases, the amount of video games that we are willing and able to buy goes up. As our income increases, the amount of phone apps we are willing and able to buy goes up. These are both normal goods. A normal good is a good that when your income increases, you want more of. Your income increases, you want more of. Are all goods normal goods? So when income increases, do you want more of all goods? Well, there are some goods that when your income increases, you want less of. This is what is called an inferior good. So notice in this graph, here we have two budget lines. So we shift the budget line out for a higher level of income. And notice here that when your income increases, you do want more restaurant meals. But notice that used clothing, the quantity actually goes down. So if when your income increases, the amount you want decreases, we have what is called an inferior good. So examples of inferior goods would be things like craft dinner. Okay, as a college student, you might be consuming a large amount of craft dinner right now. But when you get that dream job and you're making good money, what's going to happen to the quantity of craft dinner you're likely to be willing and able to buy? Yes, you can afford more. That's the higher budget line. But do you want more? So notice it's the way the indifference curves look that make it so that it's an inferior good. Because as our income increases, we don't always want more. You're going to switch to more gourmet mac and cheese, different brand, or you're going to stop having craft dinner, mac and cheese entirely, and switch to more healthy, better tasting meals. Okay. Other examples of inferior goods would be things like public transportation. So how many of you have gone to your high school reunion? Or if you're not that old yet, how many of you plan to go to your high school reunion? Okay. Do you plan to ride the bus? Well, likely when you go to your high school reunion, you want to show everyone else that you've made it, right? You're driving a nice car. Okay. Well, the public transportation is an inferior good if as your income increases, you are less likely to ride the bus. Yes, you can afford more bus trips, but because you aren't willing to buy more, then it is an inferior good. Quantity goes down as income goes up. Generics, used clothing are other examples of inferior goods. So really what we're looking at is as we change income, what happens to what you're willing to buy? That's the indifference curves. What happens to what you are able to buy? That's the budget line. So when we make decisions, we look at what we're willing and able to get.